Trimble here, author of science fiction and urban fantasy stories and also computer books, but mostly these videos are talking about my creative writing, science fiction, urban fantasy, so to speak, fantasy novels. Last video I talked about being focused and being able to do your writing, accomplish your goals regardless of all the other things you might have going on in your life. And I hope you were able to get some meat out of that video and learn something from it. It's how I'm able to be productive regardless of working a full-time job, having family, friends, doing volunteer work, and yet I'm still able to crank out a novel. Yes, it takes years, but it happens. You can get it done. If I can do it, you can absolutely do it too. But this video, I'm going to be talking more about the outlining process for writing a story, writing a novel, because I get a lot of questions from people about, well, how do you put it together? How do you take an idea and turn it into a story, turn it into a novel? So I'm going to touch on that a little bit today. Before I dive into that, I just wanted to give a little update on some news. Airstorm is still in progress. I'm working on chapter 10 now of Airstorm. I'm targeting 22 chapters for this book, so it's still has a little ways to go yet. The past 5 months I've not been doing a lot of writing on Airstorm. Truth be told, I was out of work, on unemployment, struggling writer, right? And I have a hard time sitting down and doing creative writing for myself when I'm not earning an income to support my family. Now, some people may argue, well, you could have finished your story by then and had something ready to sell. Maybe so, but there's no guarantee. If you're a writer and you have some books out there, you know there's no guarantee that when you put a book out that it's just going to become this big success and you can quit your job and earn a living off of it. Does not work out that way in 99% of the cases of authors who are writing. So what I can depend on is that when I find a job in the technical industry, that it pays and it's able to support my family. So that's what my focus has been. But the good news is I found work, I found a job, a 1-year contract doing technical writing, and I haven't started the job yet, which means I have time for writing. So I'm working on Airstorm. You're going to see some social media posts from me of my writing sessions at my favorite coffee shop or wherever. So that's good news. I'm back to writing on Airstorm. Everyone's clamoring for it. When do I get to see the sequel? It's coming. Be patient. It's getting there. Other news, Airborne is still being translated into Spanish. I've recently signed up some new beta readers for the Spanish version of Airborne. So I'm anxiously anticipating some feedback on how that's going. Also, Airborne for German is currently in the works, so that's good news. I have a beta reader who's going to be reviewing that as well, and potentially a Portuguese version of Airborne. So I'm really excited about that because I have a lot of fans in Brazil, and I know you've all have asked for a Portuguese translation of Airborne, so hopefully this will happen fairly soon. So I'm excited about it, and I know hopefully you are too. So that's it for the news for this time being. I wanted to dive into outlining. What exactly is outlining? Basically, outlining is being able to break your story into digestible pieces so that you are able to take a look at your outline at any point in time and know where you need to continue. Now, if you're doing other things like working and you're taking care of family and other things, and you're finding that you only get maybe 1 or 2 hours a week to focus on your writing, if that much, The outline is very helpful because you can dive back in, you see where you're at in your story, and you can just begin writing and start cranking out the words again. So it's very important. What goes into the outline? Multiple things. Primarily, the way I outline is I create a scene with 1 to 3 sentences, and then that gets added into a bullet. I used to use Evernote. Now I use OneNote from Microsoft, and hopefully I can show it here on the screen. The bullets represent the scenes. So I create a scene, and I'm telling the story using only 1 to 3 sentences for each scene, and I plot the entire novel out, the entire story out. Now, if you can see here on the screen of Egan's adventures, I have a new Egan story that I'm working on, and here's some spoilers. Here's my scene list for Egan's adventures, the next story in that series. And you'll see it's very brief, just individual bullets, 1 for each scene to tell the entire story. Now, because the Egan stories are pretty short, I don't break it up into chapters. But like with Airborne and Airstorm, I created all the scenes, and then I break those up into anywhere from 3 to 5 scenes per chapter. With Airstorm, there are 22 chapters that I was able to break all those scenes up into. And now your question might be, well, now that the story gets all completely mapped out, where's my creativity? Do I get to change things around? Well, of course you do. You're the author. You get to move the scenes around if you feel they don't fit in the right slots together. You can eliminate a scene from the story. Maybe you decide it's not working, so I'm going to pull this out. Maybe you want to add another scene and insert it into the story. Of course, you still have your creativity there. And what I especially like is, even though I have all my scenes mapped out, the true creativity is when you're actually writing the words. You're painting the picture of the scene for your reader. That's the fun part for me. I hope it is for you as well. Now, the outline is not just of the scenes, but you also create in your outline the world. It's called world building, and you're creating the environment that your story takes place in. That environment can be locations, different environments. It can be things, it can be organizations, it can be people that are contained in your story. It can be events, certain actions that are taking place in the story. And these can be things that are things that you're talking about, or it can just be background. Maybe your reader is not even going to know about these certain things, but it's there because it helps you mentally tell the story. So it's like creating a little encyclopedia. And if you have my Egan's Adventures in Epsilon book, in the back of the book, I actually have what I call Egan's Adventures Glossary. And I put that in there because I thought maybe the fans of the Egan stories would enjoy reading some of these descriptions of items that are contained in the story, and backgrounds behind characters in the story, organizations, starships, the names of the starships, and how I came up with those. All of that's contained in that glossary, and I thought it would be fun to expose that in the actual book itself. Although with Airborne and Airstorm now, I've not exposed the glossary, so to speak, the knowledge base, the encyclopedia, the Wikipedia for the entire world of that environment. In the future, maybe I will, but for the time being, there's too many stories, and I'm still in the middle of telling that story of Airborne in a 3-book series. So it's fun doing world building. Some authors, they spend a lot of time on world building. I do too. I do a lot of research. If you've read Airstorm, you know that there's an ancient Egyptian race called the 18th of Amos, and that's based on a factual dynasty of the Egyptian Empire, and many of the facets of that empire I've derived by doing research on what the world was like at that time and the attitudes of that ruling dynasty. So that's a big part of the story, even though you may not see the huge breadth of that history in the story. It's there in my encyclopedia because I can relay back to it when needed for telling the Airborne and Airstorm story, which I do on a regular basis. So it's very important on putting that research together, but I also enjoy telling the story as well. So I use the outline for doing that. So hopefully I have this showing on the screen here as I was talking about that process. Next video, I'm going to be talking about actually doing my writing and also doing my self-editing, and a couple little secrets about what I do to help me in my self-editing before the draft of the entire story is done, and then I hire an editor to actually do the editing of the novel itself or the story itself. And I also wanted to give a couple shout outs here as well. The first shout out I want to give is to someone that has been very helpful to me as a writer. There's a huge amount of content of books, videos, websites, blogs, information on how to write and how to be a writer. And personally, I don't read the books on how to write. In other words, how to plot a story, how to describe a character. I just don't do that because I feel I have my own voice in my stories, and I don't want to read anything that's going to make me change my voice and how I tell my stories. But I do read about what it is like to be an author, or maybe the business of being an author, and some of the things that you really have to think about in being an author. So one person has helped me tremendously, whether she knows it or not. Her name is Joanna Penn, Penn. And she has a website called thecreativepen.com. And not only is she a fiction writer herself, but she's a blogger, she's a vlogger, she does videos, she does podcast interviews of authors and their approaches, how to be independently published. She talks about the business of being an author, but she also talks about what it's like to be a successful author, having the mindset of a successful author. And that's one of my favorite books of hers, is called The Successful Author Mindset. And a picture of that book here. I highly recommend you getting that book if you're serious about your writing, if you're serious about trying to become a successful author. I also highly recommend you follow her, read her blogs, listen to her podcasts, or watch her videos, because you're going to learn a huge amount about what it's like to be an author and have that proper mindset. And you'll learn a lot about what you can do as far as marketing and different ways of exposing your writing to a large readership. So I highly recommend it. No, she's not paying me for this. I just am very grateful for the amount of knowledge I've gained by following this wonderful author, and the amount of information she's willing to provide for free in many cases to us budding authors and what we're doing. So thank you for watching the video again this time. My name Timothy Trimble. You can find me at my website there. I am the author of various fiction stories. Airborne, if you ever dreamed of flying as a kid and even later, I highly recommend this. Yeah, it's my story, but I'm getting 5-star reviews. It's available everywhere, so give it a look, and I really appreciate it if you do that. Do I have some outtakes? I don't know, maybe a small pitch for Walnut Coffee if you're in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle, north of Seattle area. Great place for coffee. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks for watching the video. Catch you again next time. Bye-bye. Or you can maybe eliminate. Let's try that again.